I've been thinking a lot lately about one very painful component around healing from a narcissistic relationship, or this particular thing that happens in the immediate aftermath that I don't really see being talked about much. And I think bringing some awareness or discussion to it could help those of you who have or are going through this, and also the friends of people who are coming out of a relationship like this. So at the end of a narcissistic relationship, and this is especially true if one person has brought this individual into their group of friends or into the community, if they are very much integrated together. So you have a lot of mutual friends. For me, I had established a lot of deep connections and a wide network of wonderful friends for a matter of years before, this person had come into my life. And of course, we were very close and shared a life together for a good chunk of time. And, I integrated them into all of my other connections. And a lot of us do that, right? We want to weave people in our lives together because what's more beautiful than more interconnection with all of us? And it's a really hard thing. It's a really painful and devastating thing to have to realize and regret later on, that you wove this person into the tapestry of, um, your extended family, into your extended community of friends and the people that you love and hold dear and who love you as well. So at the end of these relationships, there's usually a lot of shame. Like these things can blow up and rupture really quickly. Granted, they've probably been slowly creeping in over time. They say it's a lot like carbon monoxide, like you don't smell it, you can't sense it at first until you start showing symptoms. So, for those of you who have never gone through it, narcissistic abuse or psychological abuse is a lot like that. Like you don't detect it right away. And you usually only start to suspect something's going on once things have already gotten pretty toxic. It's very insidious. They hide it very well. And it's designed that way, otherwise we would leave much more quickly. So there is a nefarious intelligence in that behavior and the way that that plays out. Unfortunately, by the time we get there, the person who is enduring this experience has already been destabilized intentionally by this other person. So they are aware that they have been exhibiting behaviors that are um, out of character for them and that are probably unsavory. They're probably embarrassed about it. Technically, this can be called reactive abuse, where if someone has been on the receiving end of, these constant attacks, they are going to start to lash out. They're going to start becoming more grumpy, more irritable, and more self-serving and self-protective in response to these constant attacks, and it's not going to look good on them. And it is going to be much easier to see that person as the problem because these people, when you are dealing with that at a chronic level, you do start to break down mentally. You do start to become destabilized, and the behaviors that come from that place are not cute. And in fact, can be quite rude or alarming or aggressive. And this is all part of the plan because this person who is constantly on the attack usually has a very high level of charisma or ability to mask and remain completely calm in these situations. And that makes them look really good. That makes them look like the victim to this destabilized person's abuse when actually the roles are reversed. Now, this is classic narcissistic relational dynamics. And when you are in the position of a person who is being constantly, abused, put down, demeaned, being gaslit, and being made to question their own sanity, usually that narcissist is lying to them consistently. And then, if we call them out, then we're told that we're crazy. And after a while, it really starts to break down one's belief in oneself and one's own reality, one's own grasp on reality, one's trust in themselves and what they experience. And, also what happens, and this is really important to understand, is that narcissist will actually use the friend group as triangulation. So behind closed doors, they're actually telling the victim that they're a terrible person. Um, or any other such story that is going to diminish that person's self-esteem. And they're going to tell them that their entire friend group agrees with them, that everyone else also says these terrible things about them and sees what a bad person they are. But no one's going to tell them, but, you know, they've told the narcissist about it. So it can be a really alienating thing when, usually a person who is very close to this narcissist, specifically in romantic relationships. So that individual is someone that you once trusted over everybody else, or is supposed to be the person who knows and loves you the most. And when you're hearing from them, like, hey, and every other person that you know thinks that you're nuts and thinks that you're a horrible, deplorable human being, that's extremely damaging. This is something that happens in private. And granted, the person who's hearing this is probably not going to go to all of their friends and ask them, like, hey, this person's saying that everyone around me thinks I'm, a horrible piece of shit. Like, is that true? Usually, what is going to happen is that person is going to go internal. They are going to isolate, they're going to hide. They're probably going to go into a deep space of self-reflection. There's a lot of people who are attracted to or tolerate narcissistic abuse are very self-reflective. They're very open, a lot of times very empathic. They have compassion for people's shadows, and so they tolerate crap from other people a lot more. And when this kind of stuff starts happening, when the gaslighting really ramps up, um, they do think, okay, well, I'm not perfect. I know I have my issues and places that I need to grow. And wow, I guess this is really worse than what I thought it was. And so they'll usually withdraw to start figuring themselves out, or, and sometimes completely collapse, because the way that the narcissistic person is bringing this forward is abusive. It's not like, hey, I love you. I'm here for you. I'm seeing you're struggling with this piece. Like, can I support you in getting help around this? Even if there is a behavior that does need to work on, the narcissist is not going to bring it up in any sort of constructive or loving manner. It's very shameful. It's very hard. Meanwhile, the victims are usually the one that's like, hey, so, you try to every communication tool in the book to bring something forward with kindness. So when you or your friends have been confronted with this information that everybody hates them or thinks that they're a bad person, that causes a withdrawal. And that causes that person to, go into quite an existential crisis state. But, it's like, well, hey, if everyone thinks that I'm a huge problem, then I really need to go in and work on this. Like I'm gonna go seek out therapy or seek out all these self-help books, or, go and like find support or help, because obviously I don't want to be hurting or disrupting the lives of the people that I love and care about. Another layer to this is that at the end of these relationships, there is commonly what is called a smear campaign. And the narcissist tends to lie about the nature of the relationship and how it ended. This was true in my case. big things went down, lies and cheating. And one day I saw this email in my inbox and an Instagram post that went out to this person's entire following, giving a completely erroneous and dishonest account of what had gone on, saying that it was a mutually benevolent, conscious uncoupling thing that was happening. And I remember I still feel speechless when I think about it, because it was like this person needed to go to the entire community to get their perspective and story on it first. As far as I knew it, my whole community thought I was nuts. And if I were to say, actually, this isn't true, this is what actually happened, I personally did not have the energy to face that level of resistance. I had felt so broken down by what was already happening in private, that to have to experience that same dynamic, but in the face of all of my friends, I was just too much. Like, my nervous system was already completely shot. I was in a deep freeze. Like, we are way past fight or flight at this point. Like, usually the system just shuts down and it goes into self-preservation mode. So it's very important to understand that when someone is in that position, they have already been in a functional freeze for a very long time. They have already been broken down by the experience of having to over explain themselves or work really hard to have this other person recognize their humanity, or recognize that it's okay for them to have feelings or boundaries, or to not be okay with a certain behavior. Typically, when we're in that kind of relationship, we already feel exhausted just by trying to explain um, that we're a human being with feelings. When you experience daily interaction with someone who is high on the narcissistic spectrum, you get tired. You are literally having to, or trying to, teach them basic empathy or basic humanity. And that erodes a person's willpower and belief in humanity, belief in reality, pretty severely. So at the end of these relationships, like, a lot of this energy has been siphoned out of the person by, constantly having to try to even take up, little space and explain common decency to this person. And even if it's not true that all of their friends think they're crazy, um, the narcissist has systematically gotten into that person's psyche and made them believe that they are crazy and that everyone else thinks they are too. The narcissistic agenda is to get their target to believe a huge amount of lies, and like their own, it's like a web. And I remember so many times, um God, yeah, like sitting down on the floor while this person was saying these things, and it literally felt like a sticky web that sat about 2 feet above my head. And I would sit there paralyzed, because I knew it didn't matter what step I took. It didn't matter how I would try to engage or communicate. Like, I was going to get trapped and spun up or wrapped in, like, I could see it before it happened. And it's extremely paralyzing, and it is a web of their own creation. They have woven this very intricate persona and reality around themselves that is not authentic. It's actually a protective mechanism to protect, like, the vulnerable, authentic self. And those people who are closest to them end up getting wound up into it. And at the time, I had no idea what was happening. I just knew that I had never really experienced anything like this before. And yeah, it was literally paralyzing. And the only way I knew how to describe it was this visceral web of energy and thought form and psychic material that, yeah, was very, very sticky. And when someone is aware that this web has connected itself to the community, the greater community, um, at the end of these relationships, all that person's fight is gone. A narcissist systematically dismantles a person's fight or flight response to where they are stuck in a habitual fawn or freeze response. And when a person gets there, they literally do not, like, they're a shell of themselves. Like, I was a complete shell of myself. I felt totally debilitated, and I did not have 1 ounce of energy left in me to try to explain myself to friends or try to fight the narcissist through other people. You kind of just don't care at that point, and it feels futile. And this is because every conversation, like I said earlier, every conversation or every attempt to bring forth one's own reality or experience is met with so much punishment and so much deflection, and that you just give up. And so the main reason that a victim of narcissistic or psychological abuse isolates themselves from their friend group after these experiences is because they've given up. Like, they just don't have it. It's emotional. They just don't have it in them to, they just don't have it in them anymore. They understand that from what has been told to them, but everyone else sees this, terrible version of them, and they just go into self-protection mode. So if you have a friend who you see is going through this, then reach out to them. I personally still have a lot of friends in my community that were mutual friends that I haven't reached out to. During that time in my life, I just disconnected from pretty much all of my mutual friends, because I just needed to be safe. I needed to completely, you know, I needed to completely shut down from anything that was related to this person. Any point of contact, that's actually something that therapists will encourage victims to do. Is that any mutual friend or point of contact, like, it's good to distance yourself from them, because as a friend of both people, um, you know, the narcissistic person can gain access or information about their target, and that can be even more like dangerous and perpetuate the pain cycle for the targets. So often when someone, is seeking professional advice after going through a situation like that, they are going to be advised to, cut ties, cut any live wires with anyone who is connected to the person who has abused them. Because truly, we only really heal in that disconnection when that person doesn't have access to us anymore. And this is one of the most painful parts about going through this, is not just having, betrayal um, come up, or being, systematically abused by someone that you once deeply trusted and loved. Now you're having to face excommunicating yourself from your entire community because, like, that person has infiltrated their own story about who they are, and their own story about you or their victim, which, is a smear campaign. It's the classic ending of a narcissistic abuse cycle. Like, the narcissist will discard their victim and then put them on a smear campaign, which means they'll actually call the victim the abuser and say anything and everything to clear their own name, to make themselves look like a victim or a hero. Because the definition of a narcissist is being completely incapable of taking accountability or responsibility for one's own actions, especially harmful ones. So when a person has endured that and has been on the receiving end of that, and they're so broken down, they just hide and go into a cave because that is the safest place for them to be. Like that is, they know that that's a place that they are not going to come in contact with the narcissist's web. Like their main goal is to get away from that sticky web, and a lot of their friends have those sticky nodes there. And this is brutal because a person really needs their friends for support during these times in their life. And for me, that is like one of my most poignant places of grief, is that there are a lot of friends that I miss. There are a lot of people that I used to feel connected to. There are a lot of events and communities that I used to engage in and feel at home in and really love and cherish dearly. And after things happen in my life that I'm explaining, I have felt estranged. And I honestly have no idea what a lot of these people think or feel about me. Um, I have, as I've made more connections, I have, learned that these people have always loved me and didn't really think bad things of me, and have like, seen things in the other person that were alarming, and I do appreciate that. And I'm sure there are people who may have been convinced otherwise, and that's fine. And there is a natural process of re-emerging and reconnection, but sometimes that can take years. For me, it's been almost a decade, and there are people that I'm just now starting to reconnect with from, that part of my life. So I don't really have solutions for this. I just really wanted to speak to a component of this whole reality that we go through in these circumstances. And so if you've been here, I want you to feel validated, and know that this is like a really hard and tricky thing to navigate. And if you have a friend who you've watched isolate or go through this, and they haven't reached out to you, and maybe you've wanted to connect to them, like do it. Like reach out to that person, because they might it's likely that they are thinking that you don't like them because you believe something that the narcissist said to them. And that was true for me. Like I had already seen, the big lies go out, and I had heard from some friends that they were receiving messages and emails that were like full of things that were just so wildly distorted. Um, that I just didn't even want to touch it. Like I was just so done. You just People when we're in that position, they just don't. It's like for your own mental health, like you're so broken down, you have to rebuild yourself back up, and engaging in any of that web, it just wasn't worth it to fight for my own reality anymore, or shall I say, to fight others for my own reality and sanity anymore. That was done alone, and with the help of a therapist and friends who didn't have connections to this other person, or friends who just were not swayed by them or caught up in that web. So I know this is tricky, sticky, and maybe confusing sounding, and it is. It's extremely confusing and disorienting being in the middle of it, and even being on the outside of it. If you're someone's friend who you're watching them go through this, it can be disturbing, and you might not know either, like what's what, like who's doing what, and who's telling the truth, who isn't. It's a very precarious place to be. So if you're a friend of someone who's going through this, check up on them. If you're going through this, know that I understand this isn't going to last forever. You will build new friendships and communities, and those who really have your back will come back into your life. Thank you for listening. I hope this has been supportive to you, and I send you all my love, and I'll see you in the next video.